that trip taught me that absolutely nothing is going to leave your system unless it goes through you. And that's the first thing to understand. Dealing with the death of a loved one, any loved one, does change you to a certain extent. Self-introspection is not a pretty process.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Voices in My Head. Today on the podcast, I have Sumiran Annamaria Kashyap, popularly known as Thinking Totty. Extremely interesting person. She's a 33-year-old. From a private banking recruitment consultant to a freelance lifestyle brand writer, she is known in the digital world as Thinking Totty, a platform whereby she engages with brands on collaboration ideas and execution of brand storytelling, besides blogging about fashion, beauty, and wellness. Currently, she supports the communication and strategy firm Longform and their clients. The part that's interesting to me is that Sumiran is a scholar of divination methods and metaphysical healing, with a particular interest in Thoth Tarot, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, angel communications, and crystal healing. She credits these realms, Ayurvedic rituals, and Dr. Edward Bach's flower remedy system for bringing her close to who she has always wanted to be. I've never met Sumiran before. I've had one conversation with her on the phone and we hit it off. We spoke for 40 minutes, and I realized why I really wanted her to come on the podcast. Because here is a beautiful person with a beautiful mind, and I'm sure you're going to think the same. As always, please do subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. My conversation with Sumiran is coming up now. It's online over Skype, so I do apologize for the quality of audio, which sometimes can get iffy when you're recording online. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think.
How are you?
Good. You tell me. You made my day. I woke up and saw what you wrote for. I don't know how much of the book you read, but I mean, thank you so much. It was very kind of you.
The book made me a little teary-eyed because it was almost like listening to yourself talk, because there are quite a few similarities between the journey you've explained and expressed. I've almost I am halfway through. I went over the parts where you've written the poetry several times in each case. I think people feel a little less lonely when they read books like yours, because it's so conversational.
I guess people like us probably feel less lonely. Of certain normal people in quotes may not, may feel that they're just reading something of a person who's not really there or not all there.
I mean, I'm going to talk about this in the podcast as well. I mean, if people read books and they think, oh, this is a person just talking about their life, well, that's how storytelling started.
Yeah. I woke up and I had, I went whenever I opened Instagram and I saw that, and then I went on to Twitter because I've just got back onto Twitter, and honestly,
Me too.
I hate social media. Trust me, and it's I'm doing it so robotically, and Pritha is helping me with the PR. So a lot of times it's just do this, just do that, and I'm following instructions.
No, even I've just gotten back on Twitter, and it's a problem because I'm a talkative person, so you keep tweeting everything that's coming to your mind. It's like boom, boom, boom. So I've also just come on board because, I don't know, someone convinced me to do it, and now I'm remembering why I got off it in the first place. I'm sure Instagram has its own pros and cons in a similar fashion, but Twitter's a lot faster. And it's not that compartmentalized. Like, with Instagram grids, you go from one page to another page, you leave what you saw behind for a second. Twitter is just like a ticker. They should just call it like the headline ticker in the news. It's just like...
Honestly, the only good part is that a lot of people that I don't know have reached out. And of course, people that I know and have actually found solutions through the limited information that I'm, trying to share. And that's been quite fulfilling, if I could use that word, because there are people who had, some simple stuff. Like, I put up apple cider vinegar yesterday. So someone's husband had a chronic acidity issue, which got fixed because she's put him on this and it got fixed. And I'm so happy because that's what it did for me. And
Yeah.
so these are things that a lot of times I take for granted because that's all I do all day. This is my area of interest. I keep seeing,
Yeah.
I keep reading about it, keep, trying to research that. And I keep experimenting on myself. But a lot of people who generically maybe on social media or generically just, I don't know, existing may not have the time to research this information or try it. So when someone like this says it, they'll try it. And if it works, that's like, wow, it works. So then suddenly you become the go-to person, even though, I mean, I really, I mean, I keep telling people I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm a layman. And that's the perspective from which you'll see that. I mean, the weakest point of my book is that I'm not an expert, but that's also the strongest point of my book, that I'm not an expert.
I agree.
And
Yeah, I
it's a layman's perspective, and I think most people can. And we spoke about this as well. People can relate. It's easier to relate to me as a layman versus me as a Nobel laureate who's, I don't know, discovered the cure to some crazy disease or something like that. By the time people reach this stage of the podcast, they would have already heard me introduce you, because that
Okay.
I always shoot that separately. Yeah. So how does I mean, and I typically start with this, but we can start with anything that you like. Is that
Please.
how does someone who came from the private banking world now become thinking totty? And I googled the word totty because I was slightly unsure what it meant, and it said, and I wrote this down: girls or women regarded as objects of sexual desire. Now, I didn't know you needed a specific word for that. I thought that was quite understood in the world that we live in, but this was interesting.
But when it's the reason I laughed out loud like that when you said you googled it, because that particular definition has a sense of objectification
Of
around
course.
the idea, which is not something I subscribe to, nor do I propagate it, which sounds contradictory because it's in the name. So I'll explain the origins of the name and where it came from, and then we'll go back into how I came to being
Yes,
Thinking
please.
Totty. So we're going to begin in Delhi and go to London and come back to Delhi as...
Can we just stay in
things
London?
life.
Sorry. Yeah. Keep talking.
I was in London. I graduated in London at the time of the recession, actually. So now, originally, I was studying to be a biomedical scientist.
Wow.
And it's a very interesting story. And it's life, it's so many people out there have similar stories. So I was originally studying to be a biomedical scientist, and I had applied at Kingston University in Surrey, so that's more on the outskirts of London, to pursue that course. And my family and I, we made a move, and I was about to start in a few months. Unfortunately, my mother's health took a very serious turn for the worse. And we thought that perhaps this was not exactly the best time to, set up in a new country. So we came back, but my mom was very insistent that I don't drop a year, where my studies were concerned. And because she was in a delicate state of health, I didn't want to aggravate anything, so I started exploring other options. And the closest approximation at the time that was available was psychology, and I reasoned that later on I could go in for neuropsychology or something like that. And I said, okay, let's take that first step and then take it from there. And it was going beautifully. I mean, I had a blast. I was studying at Jesus and Mary College, Delhi University. I had excellent teachers. My batch was amazing. The seniors and the juniors were amazing. I had a wonderful time. And I learned a lot. Not just as far as the course was concerned, but also as far as the people were concerned. We had people from different cities, countries, cultures. It was a wonderful, wonderful year to be in the psychology batch of JSC. And everyone knew that I was going to go into counseling psychology. The teachers, students, everyone knew that was going to be my area of specialization. But second year was also when, unfortunately, my mom passed on. And it was hard for me to handle because I was very, very attached to my mom, I didn't have an understanding of reality without her. It was quite a shock. I mean, I didn't know a lot of things. In fact, I realized how mollycoddled I was after she passed on. And I realized I couldn't do the whole counseling, the grey area bit. And I made a knee-jerk decision to go in for organizational psychology instead, because I thought the black and white of that was better than the grey.
Okay.
of counseling psychology, although my interest, my aptitude was all in counseling and counseling psychology. And the teachers were against it, my friends were against it. But I was like, no, this is what I want to do. And I enjoyed it as well. It was fun. And it was a natural progression from that then to go back to Kingston to study organizational psychology, international HRM. That's what I took my master's in. And my first job was in the university's careers office, where we were recruitment administrators. And it was fun because you're dealing with students. And at that time, my university had bid for some money from what was called the Higher Education Funding Council of England.
Right.
To put into a project for graduate development. Right? The project was actually called G2B, Graduate to Business, and that's what it was. It was about taking a graduate and finding them a job with a business, graduate to business, the transition from study life to work life, so to speak. And this project was aimed at training people with employability skills to improve their chances of landing a job, especially in the challenging environment of the sector.
Right.
And here I met potential future employers who were working for headhunting firms.
Right.
And that's how I'm from recruitment administration into recruitment consultancy.
Okay.
And I learned tremendous life skills and job skills. Discipline, structure, target-oriented behavior. Although I'm not really a number cruncher, I'm not a salesy person, and recruitment is something like a sales function there. It's not the same as HR, and here we tend to sort of mix the two functions.
Right.
So that was another culture shock. However, well, there's nothing worse than being good at a job that you don't really enjoy.
Right. I know what you mean. 100%. Like I totally get what you're saying. I did one of those for 12 years. I know what you mean.
Yeah. The dissonance in that, and I feel horrible saying it because I feel ungrateful because I learned so much about how to live life and how to conduct myself and how to discipline myself and how to communicate. I learned so many skills, and I find myself applying so many of the phrases we had learned in that job, even now. For example, when we were trying to coax a private banker that we were trying to poach into having a conversation with us, we were taught to say, would you be open to an exploratory conversation, which I thought was a lovely phrase.
Yeah, that's
and
nice.
I still find myself using that phrase.
I think you can use that for anything, right?
Anything. Yeah, absolutely. And I use it everywhere whenever it's like early stages of a discussion. So someone approaching me for a brand collaboration on Thinking Totty, wanting to know more about, how I go about it. I'll give them a broad outline, and then I'll say, I'm happy to have an exploratory conversation with you on the phone. And it takes me back to the time when I first learned the phrase. So, that's just a very small example. So I feel ungrateful saying things like, nothing worse than being good at a job you didn't like. But what I meant is it wasn't really to my personality. I'm not the kind of, numbers-oriented person who, it used to, it aggravated anxiety in me because I would come to work first thing in the morning. The first email that hits you is one that shows your call log, how long you've been on the phone the day before, how many people have you spoken to, why is it less than 3 hours. The next email is like a league table as to where you stand with respect to the other consultants in terms of how many of your, how many new candidates have you added to the system, how many first interviews have gone to second interview, how close are you to your quarterly target. And then you've got the red, green, yellow color coding happening, and everyone's reading it all at the same time. So I'm not saying that, as I said, I was competent at the job, but I didn't enjoy it because I didn't like this sort of stuff breathing down my neck.
Seems like a hyper-competitive atmosphere, or at least a very competitive atmosphere. And I think that's what the finance world and banking, a lot of times, this is the way to do it, unfortunately. And even sales, I mean, not just finance, but any sort of sales job, and surprisingly how organizational behavior, you don't typically hear of people who've done that, put themselves under pressure in these kind of jobs. I mean, this is actually the first time I'm hearing it with someone, and I'm sure it must be happening a lot, but for me, it's new.
Yeah. And I thought that eventually I'd like to make a move from that sort of an environment and go in-house rather than agency. But because there's such a divide between what HR and recruitment is in that work culture, people don't trust you.
Right.
Or they just assume you don't know what you want when you want to make that kind of a jump. So it became a vicious cycle, and you started jumping from agency to agency to try and satiate yourself, and then there comes a time when you've got more going out than you've got coming in.
Sure.
And I felt so guilty about that stage in my life because I felt like this was the prime part of my 20s, and I'd been given all the space, time, resources, anything I needed to run with whatever I had in mind. And here I was just mucking it up.
You were still in London then? You were still in London?
Still in London. Yeah. And I thought I was going with the flow as well. I thought I was doing a good enough job of keeping my head above the water during the challenging environment of the recession. But that's when I realized, wow, you're really not the greatest thing since sliced bread. We all tend to think we're really good at certain things, right? Till you hit the big bad world and you're like, wow, okay. And I felt so guilty and I felt so upset about what was happening. And, but now when I look back, I don't think I'd be the kind of person I am now if it wasn't for those 4 years.
Sure.
I wouldn't take them back. I wouldn't change them. And I got friends for life out of them, even, personal relationships, romantic relationships, intimate relationships, whatever I learned about humans through those, I would not change that for anything in the world, So so then I decided to come home because this whole thing of having too much going out and not enough coming in was not a great idea. And I needed to take a pit stop.
Right.
And sort of do a bit of an inventory check and then consider going back. And that's, it was during this break period that I met my, then boyfriend, then husband, now ex-husband. We're not together anymore. The idea of going back to another country at that time just became a distant fact because I was very much here. I was exploring similar options here. It was during this downtime period that I started rediscovering writing as something I enjoyed doing.
Right.
I had still at that point not taken it seriously enough. I was just using the time to take a bit of a break and spend time with family.
Okay.
And my life in the UK had kind of taken a toll on my health because, I felt like the kind of person I was then was just somebody who was living in this massive coping mechanism capsule, trying to deal with the death of, the one parent who's always known. And I have to tell you, I was quite an insufferable human being because I was angry all the time. I was confrontational. I was difficult to deal with.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I was. And I didn't realize it at the time, There did come a point in time where I had to put out an email to friends to sort of explain my mind space. And then I decided to host a birthday party as a peace offering. And I said that if any of you don't come for it, I'll totally get it. But that happened. I mean, it got so unpleasant and people were getting so affected by the way I was behaving that I was losing friends in this manner. And I think that was the first time when I seriously started understanding the importance of self-introspection.
But did any of your friends who do you well recognize that this is out of character behavior or try to help you or try to say that, listen, Sumiran, this looks like a mental health issue. Maybe you're not coping the right way with certain things that have transpired in your life. Do you need to get some help? Did they say that? Did anyone say that? Because unfortunately, I never got that kind of intervention, and that maybe because I didn't give enough, signals or warning signals, or I didn't cry out loud enough for help. And sometimes it just goes unnoticed. People don't recognize I'm, generally speaking, an introverted person, regardless of how well I may present on a podcast or in front of a camera or as an author. I'm an introverted person. I don't think I do too well with masses of people or beyond a certain handful of people. And that's just me, though. That's so I'm wondering. So that was interesting that some of your friends noticed that and said that to you, that or tried to help you. Is that even?
Yes.
Is it worth saying?
Yeah, of course. And friends, partners, they were good people, and that's why it was important to reciprocate.
Sure.
I think when you open up and you ask for help or even communicate how you're feeling, I think even if one person is willing to understand, it's a blessing.
Oh yeah, agreed.
I had that. I definitely had that, and I kept my family away from this because I knew they'd be very, very concerned. I mean, if any family members listening now, they'd be listening to it for the first time, to be honest.
Oh wow.
So yeah. So I wouldn't change those 4-5 years for anything, because at work I learned so much about work life, and outside of work I learned so much about what it meant to interact with people, and what it means to really give and take.
You said you started writing then.
Yeah. No, I started writing when I came back here.
Okay.
And I was very sporadic with it. I was very, very sporadic with it, because I had still not managed to wean myself away from the idea of the relative stability of the corporate commercial job that recruitment was. I was still exploring options here. At the same time, my heart wasn't really pushing me to sign the dotted line with anything. I was quite in a state of flux. I was trying to take the opportunity to, reconnect with my original area of interest, which was the counseling, behavioral psychology that I had left in college.
Sure.
I tried to look at short courses or things that could help me come back. These are fields where you need some sort of accreditation to get back.
Absolutely,
or get into. You can't just jump from, a corporate job like that and just start. You call yourself a child psychologist. You can't do that.
Right.
So, and then I realized that when I was sort of grasping at the straws for that, that's when I realized that I was dealing with a very expensive mistake, expensive in every sense of the word, because you just have to have the confidence to, follow your instinct and stick to it. If I had to deal with uncertainty, I would have rather have dealt with the early uncertainty one feels when one is following one's instinct, than have to deal with this kind of uncertainty.
But very rarely does anybody get this right. People don't really get this right. I mean, I haven't gotten this right. I've made several expensive mistakes. You can ask my parents will be very happy to tell you what expensive mistakes that I have made. So it's difficult, and also it's much harder when you're younger. I mean, I remember how it was to go in college, and what did I want to do? I had no idea. I maybe now at almost 35, I think I know what I want to do, right? I'm enjoying podcasting as a medium. People seem to be people like yourself, who I consider to be amazing writers, and I know that you need to write a book yourself because I've just anybody who can go on your Instagram and just see the way you write, and it's amazing. I think maybe I'm finally in the right place mentally, and this is what I need to do, but it took me maybe 33, 34 years to figure that one out. So it's not easy.
It was scary for me because I've always been the person who always knew what they wanted to do. And I had a very clear-cut, organized way of going through things.
That's amazing.
Always, even when I was in school. So this was all new to me. But out of expensive mistakes come priceless experiences.
Wow. That's such a good quote, yeah.
You're gonna write it down.
Yeah, that's such a quotable quote. I'm gonna make a note of that later.
Yeah, but that's how I looked at it, and it all had a role to play. I'm grateful for all of it, absolutely all of it, because there are so many experiences in my job now, whether it's my day job or whether it's me interacting with people and with brands as Thinking Totty. There's always elements of psychology and child psychology or organizational psychology coming in. Sure. And things just fly out of my mouth when people are talking to me and they're like, how do you know that? Mm-hmm. I do know that because I'm a voracious reader and I absorb what I read really well. And I don't mean to say that in a self-flattering way, but it is a knack. I enjoy reading. I enjoy study.
Right.
I enjoy study. I enjoy research, and I'm very excited with new skill acquisition all the time. This is my greatest trait.
Right.
This is my greatest trait. And so Thinking Totty was born out of memories of a phrase that people used to use in the UK The original phrase is, I'm a thinking man's Totty.
Okay. Okay. That's so derogatory, yeah. At least sounds derogatory.
Because of the meaning of the word Totty there. And it's urban street slang.
Yeah, like totty rhymes
But
with hottie. I think if you want to remember what totty means, I think hottie means kind of the same thing, except hottie is not specific to women. It could be used for a man too.
it could,
But
and then there's HOTTIE, and then there's HAUGHTY.
yeah, oh god, yeah. Now you're really doing doing the wordplay.
And now I'm doing
So
the
that's
wordplay.
when you came up with. So from that phrase you said, the thinking man's totty came out,
A
thinking
thinking man's
totty.
Totty, because I reckon thinking men like thinking Totties.
Okay, okay.
It
Because it's
was
so rare to
also
find
an
a man who
attempt.
thinks. So
No, I think that everybody thinks. I think it's just about what kind of thinking resonates with who you are.
are you a
You
feminist?
know, I am a feminist. Yes, I am. But I am the kind of feminist that takes a lot of care to not succumb to certain misdirections. Let me explain that very clearly with a simple example so that it doesn't get misconstrued. And I give this example whenever a conversation like this comes up.
I mean, I'm
If I
asking in a good
take
way.
the
I think it's good to be a feminist. Go ahead. You should be a
it is
feminist. Yeah.
of course it. I think the fact that you and I are able to converse like this about all these topics without fear of judgment is
Oh, for sure.
because there was a time when women were not allowed any of this.
Right.
Some misdirections are inadvertent. The intention is in the right place. I'll give you a small example. If I take the metro, okay, and I see a gentleman sitting on a seat, and I'm carrying grocery bags and my office bag, and he's carrying his grocery bags and his office bag. I'm the kind of feminist who would not expect him necessarily to give his seat to me
Sure.
because of the sense of equality. You've had a long day. I've had a long day. You're carrying your groceries after work. I'm carrying my groceries after work. You got there before me. You got the seat. You're tired. You keep sitting.
Sure.
It's fine. Out of a sense of chivalry, he might offer it to me.
Yeah, I understand.
But just like he would decline the seat gracefully, I would decline the seat gracefully.
Sure.
You're tired. You're just as tired as me. Please remain seated.
Got it.
That's the kind of feminist I am. I'm not that kind of person who is gonna take a selfie or a video of myself in the metro saying, "Look at this dude. Chivalry is dead. #chivalry is dead."
Oh God, no! I would not expect you wouldn't be on the podcast. Trust me. Even though we've just spoken once, but I knew that. I mean, that I wouldn't expect that. So sorry. Yeah, I went down the feminist path, but you were still on thinking Totty.
No. It's a question I'm proud to answer. It's a question I'm proud to answer. And I hope I haven't caused any misunderstandings or there's no misconstruement, because this is a topic where what people say is misconstrued easily, which is why I use this example, because I think it's a simple and easy.
Don't worry, this is not Arnab Goswami's show. I'm sure you can get away with saying whatever the hell you want, and so can I. And this is why I like podcasting as a medium, because I don't want to be censored. I want to abuse if I want. I want to get upset about something if I want, and I want the person who's in discussion with me to have that freedom. As I said, I want this, and every person who comes on the podcast, when I send them an email pre the podcast, it's like, this is you and me having a cup of coffee, talking about what the hell we want without judgment. If somebody wants to take it in you can take the best thing in the worst possible way. If something, it depends. This is so subjective, right? Somebody can take great offense to something you just said or something I said, and screw them, honestly, right? So this is my podcast. So if you don't like it, guys, you can switch off right now.
There you go. So I'm just bringing the conversation to what we were talking about in terms of
So then Thinking Totty was kind of born out of that.
Thinking Totty was just, the name just flew out, and I was like, yeah, thinking men like thinking Totties. And I knew that a lot of people would ask me what it means here, and I describe it like that. Urban streets, the word Totty is urban street slang for smart, sexy, intelligent woman. And when you Google it, it gives you that kind of. When you Google it, it gives you that kind of.
Yeah, I think smart, sexy, intelligent woman
objectifying
makes
definition. I'm
sense.
not sure I like it very much. It's my interpretation of something. I mean, what's wrong in saying smart, sexy, intelligent woman? Nothing's wrong in that. A thinking man would never objectify anybody, man or woman.
Sure.
And I should like to be the thinking Totty of such a thinking man.
Understood.
So it's just, as I said, it's easy, playful, carefree wordplay. And a lot of people tell me that, it's bad etiquette to refer to someone who's a blogger who has a blog by their blog name in person. I've been introduced as Thinking Totty. People would say at events, "This is Thinking Totty," and I don't mind it at all.
Yeah,
because
I don't know why would you mind it, because you've that's your screen name, or that's your that's yeah. So why would you mind?
It's absolutely fine, and I love every aspect of my name as well. So you can call me Sumiran, you can call me Annamaria, you can call me my entire full name. It's
so
all,
your middle name is also intriguing. We're still on names. I haven't even got to the main stuff yet, but like that's because just you named Thinking Totty as there's enough, as a subject you can keep discussing what that means. But even your middle name, I wanted to ask you, is that where did you get your middle name from? Because that's an uncommon one, right?
My mother was my mother is Anglo-Indian. My late mother is Anglo-Indian.
Right.
And we're baptized, my two brothers and I.
Okay.
So we all have names like this. My eldest is Angelo. My second brother is Andrew. Yeah, nice. My second brother is Andrew, and I'm Annamaria. And mine was inspired by the name. Mine was inspired by the name of an Italian saint. And the reason it had to be an Italian saint is because my mom wished for me at the Trevi Fountain. Okay. She was like, two sons, third baby, please, one girl.
Got it.
So she's like, no, she willed a girl into existence.
Wow.
And so I suppose that's where the name was inspired from.
Understood.
And from here I come to the early experiences of the start of a very spiritual journey. I think it sowed the seeds, because this was the year my mom passed away. She was like, once your exams are over, let's you and I make a trip to Italy.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, that's great, fantastic. And we had a girls trip planned out, and I had 2 exams left. And she's like, okay, your last exam finishes this date, we leave this date. Suitcases were out, they were getting packed while I was, preparing for these exams. And unfortunately, the weekend before we were supposed to fly, she passed on. And
how old were you then, if you don't mind me asking?
20.
That's way too young to. Well, no age is. It's difficult to lose a parent at any age.
It could have been. I mean, look at the stories of people and children around the world. There are children who say that they lost their parents or parents so early they have no memory whatsoever. They have to go by stories that their families share with them. I have so much more than that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what's worse, and it's a difficult subject to even ask about as a from an outsider's perspective. But how did you deal with that? And I mean, since this is a wellness podcast, I think that may help a lot of people, because people deal with a lot of things. May not be the loss, may not be just the loss of a parent, but people are always mourning something in their life, even if they don't know it.
Yeah. So that was the first time I experienced death and bereavement at that close quarters.
Sure.
So close, direct. Firstly, it was the intensity of that. Secondly, it was the intensity of the unexpectedness. I didn't think that I was going to lose my mom. And it was very nice. We knew, of course, there were health issues, but we didn't think it was going to be that the ultimate result was going to be this, and it didn't see it coming. And how did I deal with it? Well, I went to college on Monday and I wrote my exam.
Right.
And I wrote the exam after that.
Okay.
Because that's exactly what my mother would have wanted me to do.
Okay.
I'm thinking of my experience. I'm not saying everyone should find it in
Yeah, yeah,
themselves
yeah.
to carry
Of
on with
course, this is
their lives.
about you
You
and
know,
how what
everyone,
people are going to learn
this
from
is
you.
me. And a lot of people were very worried because they were like, she's just gotten up and gone to college and she's writing an exam. People were peeping into the exam hall to see, is she going to combust? Is she going to break down? I don't know where I got the strength from.
Right.
I don't know. And I was very calm.
Okay.
And yeah, of course, put it down to the fact that I hadn't processed that she'd passed on, possibly. But I had processed she had passed on because we buried her the weekend before I wrote the exam.
Right.
It had been processed.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote the exam on the Monday, and then I wrote the last exam that followed it, and I went to Italy on that trip.
Alone.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whoever we had, a contact, the person that we had as the friend or the acquaintance who was guiding us through where we could have gone to Italy, they were there to help me. They helped me make an itinerary, but it was essentially me by myself.
Sure.
And I felt I owed it to our relationship. I felt I owed it to her. I felt I owed it to the kind of person I was meant to be to put myself through this experience.
Okay.
And since this is a wellness podcast, I would say that wellness to me means understanding that nothing is going to leave your system unless it passes through you. And this is not just about negativity.
Sure.
This is about. This is also about the positive stuff. You know, when we have positive experiences in life, we savor it. We try to, prolong its experience.
Sure.
Right? Because you want to keep reliving that feeling over and over. But at some point, it settles down, right?
Yep.
The excitement or happiness of something settles down. And it's the same with negative experiences. You eventually overcome it.
Sure.
Some people would argue that you never overcome it. You just learn to live with it. Whatever you call it.
Right.
The point is that it becomes a chapter in your life.
Right.
Rather
Sure.
than the predominant force that's determining the way you behave on a daily basis.
Sure.
Although that happens for a while, right? That happens for a while. And that trip taught me that absolutely nothing is going to leave your system unless it goes through you. And that's the first thing to understand. Dealing with the death of a loved one, any loved one, does change you to a certain extent.
Right.
And no amount of expression or coping or whatever it is you do to help yourself seems enough, because I carried that kind of heaviness with me to the UK, and I felt like I was ranting or venting at friends in that sort of difficult confrontational person I would be.
Right.
It was my first experience away from home. I could not relate to the fact that the one parent I was truly attached to was no more, that I couldn't pick up the phone and hear her voice. There was no physical anchor point of reference. You
Right.
know, my brothers are as good as parents. In fact, better in some cases, I would argue. And my extended joint family have always been incredibly supportive, in the way that they've helped me through that particular experience. And then there are other family friends who I refer to as Nani and Masi, because they're so close to me.
Sure.
They're not family friends. They are my Nani, Masi, Mosa. I refer to them like that. I address them like that. So they've all had a role to play in keeping me propped up. So that support system was definitely there. And people can help you through your journey. They cannot live it for you. You have to put yourself through the experience of experiencing it.
Right.
It sounds very punitive. It sounds like you're punishing yourself. Some people take a very punitive approach. It's not necessary.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying, because so is exercise, right? So is yoga. Yoga is punitive for me. I enjoy it, but it hurts. And until the muscle is not hurting and sore, that's when you know that you've done something to exercise it. It's recovering. It's going to become stronger. Same way with the mind, and same way with the body, and this makes a lot of sense and resonates with me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people, that it has to go through you. That experience has to happen. Those thoughts, those feelings have to happen.
Because it's during that process of it literally coursing through your veins, do you understand what self-introspection is?
Sure.
And let me tell you, based on my personal experiences, self-introspection is not a pretty process. It has its pretty moments and it has its gentle moments, but by and large, it's not. It's very disorienting. It's a lonely road. It's very enlightening. And you understand basic emotions that you think you knew in a very different sense. We think we know what joy or sadness or detachment or letting go or pain. We think we've understood these emotions,
Sure.
by the time we reach whatever age we're at. But we experience it so much with such a different sort of intensity when we look at it from a self-introspective point of view. Because there's no running away from that. Where are you going to go running away from yourself?
Yeah, you can't. And I think often enough we try, but see, that's where, mental health and all these things have become such a big. It's that's the real pandemic actually that we're dealing with. This coronavirus thing is going to go away, or even if it doesn't, we're going to live. We learn to live with it. It's what the struggle is learning to live with ourselves. And I know this sounds like woo woo and this guy's trying to just sound very intelligent, but I've kind of done what you're saying too. But so it makes a lot of sense to me that
Yeah.
living with yourself is the hardest.
Yeah, yeah. And I think quarantine, self-isolation, this has just opened our eyes up to that fact, and before we start talking about other people revealing their true colors, I think if we can come to terms with the revelations of our own true colors, that's a lot to get done in a day, and it's a day by day process. There I don't think that I don't know if I'm wrong, but I don't think there ever comes a day when you can say I have successfully completed self introspection.
Right.
For as long as you're alive, and as for as long as you're interacting with other people and you're experiencing things in the world, you can't say that, because you are impacted by other people and experiences around you, unless you want to be the frog under the stone, or you want to be stuck up there in your ivory tower and you think you're better than everyone else. I mean, sure, go ahead, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's what life is. And I don't think that's why we're born. We're our biggest. So yes, change is the only constant, but I don't know why we think of change as the only constant as something that's happening in an outwardly sense. I think we're all beings of energy, right?
Sure.
Whether we look at it from a science perspective or a spiritual perspective, we're all beings of energy, and our greatest gift and our greatest ability is in malleability.
Sure.
Change is the only constant, but we can experience its constancy only when we embrace that malleability.
Right.
It's fine if your intelligence is focused on a particular specialty. That's great. That's good. That means you've chosen one particular area and you're aiming at whatever level of perfection at it, and you're using it to make a difference in other people's life. That's fantastic. But I've been dealt certain cards in life, and if I didn't take the malleability approach, then I don't think I could particularly call myself intelligent, because isn't it supposed to be a function of intelligence that if a particular environment is not conducive, or if certain decisions you've made are not working out, you should be able to apply the same fervor, the same curiosity, the same hard work, the same sense of enterprise to something else. You should be able to mold your intelligence to whatever else life throws at you. And I'm not saying that's why I give the example of people who are specialists. I'm not saying that those who do that and choose one area aren't intelligent. No, of course not. I'm just saying that if you've been dealt certain cards where you have to look at malleability in the way that I have, in whatever I've explained to you so far, do your best to embrace that malleability, and then start thinking about what intelligence can mean. And I still use that word very carefully when it comes to myself. If I can just say that, yes, I've been dealt X cards, and this is how I've dealt with them, and this is what I've done out of the cards that have been dealt to me, and this is what I've done to help those around me, then yeah, I've done something. And there always has to be some sort of service orientation.
Right.
At whatever level, whatever you do, I think there has to be some sort of service orientation for one to experience contentment. I place a higher premium on contentment than I do on happiness. And contentment comes from a sense of replenishment, and that replenishment comes when you share. I think you share negative stories, you experiences, you share positivity. If you have a gift, you share it with the world. If you have more than you need, you share some of that with the world. And that sets into motion a cyclical process of replenishment. And I think that's what keeps the collective consciousness alive. And that's what I meant when I said, when I read your book, that someone out there who's an extension of the collective consciousness is writing a book like that. Someone out there is reading a book like that.
Right.
And you've made your contribution to the collective consciousness by writing that book. I've made my contribution by talking about how it might have made a difference to my life because it would inspire someone else.
Sure.
It just goes on and on and on.
So, but all this that you're saying, there is such a strong spiritual, if not undercurrent. I mean, there's just spirituality in a lot of what you're saying, and that brings me to what I had introduced you with, which was you've said you're a scholar of divination methods and the metaphysical healing and the metaphysical world, and we were discussing this on the phone last week. So this is an area that fascinates me. I don't know much about it. I know a little bit about it, and there is a huge wellness angle to this, which perhaps needs to be spelt out. It may not be as obvious as lifting weights or having apple cider vinegar, which are in your face wellness. But the spiritual aspect, and which is why I've only gone into this a little bit in episode 13, or was it episode 12, which was Shweta Kapoor. She's a Buddhist, so we spoke in the end a bit about chanting and what Buddhism means to her, and that's now coming up again with you, and it's a very strong energy, if I can use that word. So can you just go into that a bit in terms of what your practice of divination methods and the metaphysical understanding that you have, and there's a lot of other stuff that you do, tarot, angel communication, crystal healing. So this is an area that has not been explored on the podcast, and which is why, I mean, we can just keep talking, which is why I told you keep 2 hours free, because I know there are people who are interested in this, who are going to want to hear about it, and I'm definitely interested in it.
My affinity with these divination methods, tarot, angel cards, crystals, is the result of me reconnecting with the kind of child I was and the kind of adult I could have been had I just taken that child by the hand and taken her through life's processes. I remember, and this is the result of certain kind of meditation practices. When I was little, I always had an intuitive affinity to these realms. I had something of a photographic memory. I used to connect with patterns and symbols in a very intense way, and I never used to even talk to my mother or my siblings about it because I used to think that they wouldn't understand where I'm coming from. But as a child, I felt like I didn't really need a lot of friends as long as I had my books and as long as I had my coloring books where I used to work with these patterns and symbols. And I grew up with all my cousins around me. We've all grown up in the family home where I live, and as a bunch of kids, we felt like we didn't need other kids in the colony, and so I had friends in that sense because I was growing up with cousins, but I liked to spend time by myself. I was extremely hypersensitive as a child. I still am quite hypersensitive. I do turn on the tap quite easily. But when I was little, I was another level of hypersensitive. I used to actually feel very, very deeply for life and for inanimate objects as well. And it's easy to brush that off when it's a child because you think it's a child. A child will feel bad if their favorite bunny got hurt or their favorite desk got hurt, or they feel for the what animals on the street in the way that children do. But it was a little bit more than that. I genuinely felt like I could understand what was going on in the head of that animal.
Wow.
We call that some strong level of empathy now.
Right.
In spiritualist movements, these are all signs and symbols of very strong empathetic personalities. I would feel very strongly for other kids. I would feel very strongly for my brothers. My brothers grew up in boarding school, so when we used to see them off at boarding school, I used to bawl my eyes out, and to the observer, it would seem like the kid is crying because her brothers are going to boarding school. I was actually crying because I felt that I could feel what they were. Sorry, everyone misses home when they're in boarding school. Everyone feels nervous or anxious or worried or whatever. I felt like I could feel those things, but because there was an age difference, because I was so little, there wasn't a lot of communication around those things. But I felt like I could feel those. And I have very clear memories of those. Me sitting in the car, seeing my brothers off. It was very clear memories. You can feel very strongly, broadly speaking.
Understood.
And I didn't really do much about it.
Okay.
And I feel like if I had growing up, then I would be a lot more impactful as a speaker. I'm quite chatty.
No, I think you're making an impact. Don't worry about that. But when you say I could have done something about it, what can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by you mean delve into the subject a bit more, or get into some sort of practice, meditation, or something like that?
I used to have a lot of sensorial experiences, which I used to report to my mother.
Okay.
But she would just put it down to a child's imagination, or she would find ways to, placate me and say that this is what you're feeling, that is what you're feeling. My mother was a very spiritual and prayerful person.
Okay.
So she did speak to a priest and things like that. But I don't remember anything being done further about it. So, and then it just started coming to me with pressing urgency much later in life, i.e. now. And when I was gifted my first deck of tarot cards, when I saw the rich symbolism on the deck, I felt a direct connection with that kid.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, that excitement came right back. And that's why that particular deck is always my favorite. It's called the Thoth deck, Thoth.
Yeah, there was some. I was actually googling this. I mean, of course, I knew tarot and I know a bit about it, but Thoth and there are like 6 different ways to pronounce this. So, what is the right way in our Indian English? The right way to pronounce it, because I've heard like 3 different ways to pronounce it for sure.
In the way that you would pronounce the word oath.
Okay, so Thoth. And what does that mean? I mean, is this a special kind of tarot, or tarot's tarot, or the different forms of tarot?
He is an Egyptian god. This particular tarot is quite eclectic in its foundation stones, in the sense that it combines spirituality and mysticism from a variety of methodologies or thought processes from cultures around the world. But the ones that stand out for me are the Jewish Kabbalah, or the Tree of Life, as the Kabbalah explains it, and Egyptian mysticism.
Okay.
So he is a god of Thoth is a god of spirituality, science, magic, and healing and writing. Wow. So when I learned that, I felt an even stronger affinity with this deck.
So this is a bit of an odd gift for a child. I mean, did you were gifted tarot cards?
No, I was not gifted this as a child. I was gifted this now as a grown-up.
You were gifted this
when
now.
I was gifted it, I reconnected with the
right. Okay,
with
understood.
The kid.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. Yeah, I understand now.
So I had such a strong interest in symbolisms and what they mean, and I used to love riddles, puzzles, visual puzzles like that. So it revived that excitement and intuitive connect with symbolisms. Okay. What do symbols mean? They could have religious significance, cultural significance. They could just be geometrical shapes that mean different things, And I just went down that proverbial rabbit hole all over again, and I couldn't be happier in life because I feel like I'm closer to that kid, now. And a lot of people think that there's no logic to the way tarot cards are read. It couldn't be far from the truth. It's actually an incredible combination of science, art, and maths.
Okay.
And I'm horrible at maths, and I was horrible at physics in school, but this maths I can do.
Okay.
This maths I can do, and the metaphysics side of physics I can do. So the way the symbols are drawn out on tarot cards are a reflection of the way the universe functions. And there's a lot of similarities in the way. There are certain similarities in the way the Kabbalah Tree of Life, and say maybe the Vedic understanding of the workings of the cosmos are explained. The numbers on the cards from 0 to 10 reflect certain characteristics about the way the divine realm and the human realm interact with each other.
Okay.
So we're so used to as human beings thinking that because we're humans and then there's a god or there's a divine being or a divine force out there, we are influenced only by the divine, right?
Okay.
Exactly, it's a two-way process. The divine is also influenced by what human beings do. It's not just that, it's not a prescriptive formula. It's not that we're sitting and waiting for the divine to do things.
Okay.
Although we tend to do that, right? We have a question, we run to the divine. We want to celebrate, we run to the divine. We think that the divine acts and therefore we act. No, it's a two-way process. The divine gets affected by the way the human behaves and the decisions that the human being makes as well.
Okay.
So each number has a significance in terms of a personality trait or whether it corresponds to masculinity or femininity.
Okay.
And when you combine those things, you get some sort of an idea. You're able to make an interpretation according to the context of the question that someone asks. So if you ask me a question related to your work or your personal life or soul purpose, anything else, a significant life event, and a particular card comes out, the number on that card and the particular aspects of femininity or masculinity, plus the particular aspects of elements of the cosmos that it relates to, will help make an interpretation that will form the basis of the answer to your question. So it's quite similar to the way other scientific or artistic or mathematical schemes of work. It does require study, it does require experience because of this reason. Because you have to understand what each number on the tree of life means. You have to understand the way it came to be constructed. You have to understand why this corresponds to masculinity and why this to femininity, why these qualities here, why those there, how they combine with each other, and how they, express themselves in humanity. So, yes, there is a lot of research and study and practice that's required, but the way you do it opens up your natural intuitive capacity. So you combine the two when you're reading it.
A lot of skeptics or critics of any of this entire realm of the metaphysical and tarot and fortune tellers and in Hindus is patris and all astrology, this stuff is that so much of it's subjective in the sense that there is a generic, let's say, 1 to 10, as you're saying, what the interpretation is. It may be actually it's open to interpretation. 0 to 10. So you may interpret it the same question, and I've pulled out the same card. If I've gone to three different, let's say, these tarot readers, all three may interpret it differently. Or the other criticism is that all three of them may interpret it so generically that it may fit anyone and any situation, and that you know what I'm talking about, because and a lot of the people who do this and who are not as perhaps spiritually connected to it and who are trying to make money from it or whatever they're trying to do from it, is a lot of it is considered to be a con artist game. And I say that with, I don't say that for you, but because I've met so many of them and I've written about that in my book. There's a chapter on psychics and self-fulfilling prophecies and how I've unfortunately trashed that a bit. But and I've just generically done that with the people that I have met, and
Sure.
it didn't work for me because I went to these people, or I ended up interacting with these people when I actually needed to see a therapist rather than a psychic. I needed to see a psychologist, not a psychic. And a lot of times they can pick up that they sense that this person is in trouble, and most of the times people are in trouble when they go to people like this, and you get taken advantage of. People take advantage of you sometimes. So I've asked you a lot of things, but yeah.
No. Okay, so there's a reason why there's an established form of study to it then, and why you're expected to spend some time understanding how it works. It's like studying for any other course, right? You understand the theory of it and the background of it. So because there is one way that, because there is the Kabbalah will be the same whether you read it or I read it.
Okay.
If I gave you, like, it's the same book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Introduction to Kabbalah.
Yes, understood.
It would be the same information. And the tree of life or the Sephirot and its elements or the Sephira, they are going to be explained the same way whether you read a book here in India or you read a book in America, right?
Sure. Yeah.
They are in established ideas. In the same way that introduction to physics or biology or English or maths would be the same everywhere, right? Whether you're in this school or that school, the fundamentals are the same.
Right.
So those are to be studied for that sense of standardization. So if I say that I'm a student of Kabbalah and someone else says they're a student of Kabbalah, when we both talk Kabbalah, we should be able to understand what we're saying to each other, because we're studying the same standardized set of information, right? The tree of life or the Sephirot itself is very dynamic. That's a separate thing. But the fundamental theory as to how it came to be constructed, the interaction between divinity and humanity, and the meaning of the numbers, etc., that's all the same, right?
Okay.
So so that's the standardization bit, and that's exactly when a good tarot reader will always politely reiterate that you have to give them some sort of a question or an area of inquiry before you start your reading as the question.
Sure.
Okay. If you came to me for a reading, I would always ask you, do you have a specific question in mind? Or a particular area that the question pertains to?
Okay.
Because that helps keep the free interpretation within the context of that area.
Okay. Yeah. So, but the problem is with the interpretation, right? That's what my question was, that you may interpret it
exactly
differently.
So people come to me sometimes saying, no, I don't really have a particular question, just generally like what's going on in my life. I would never do a tarot reading for that person.
Okay.
Not because I don't have the competence. But because if you don't know why it is that you need my help,
right,
how can I help you?
I hope you're enjoying my chat with Sumiran. This is part 1 of the episode. We're going to be back shortly with part 2 because our conversation lasted so long and we discussed so many interesting things. So I didn't want you to lose focus. So I've split it into 2 parts. See you soon.
Voices in My Head is created and hosted by Yameer Adhar. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. We disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may arise from any information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guests' qualifications or credibility. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.